the computer, and then I'll post it. Yeah, so we can go ahead and actually kind of get the ball rolling here. If people come in late, so be it. But guys, thanks for joining. Today I just want to introduce my uncle, Marlon Dechausay, who is the Memphis Associate AD for Student Athlete Services. He went to school at Louisiana Lafayette in Syracuse, and then has since worked in college athletics at Texas Tech, Indiana State, Florida Atlantic, Illinois, and Memphis. Am I missing anything there, Marlon?
Florida State.
Florida State. Okay, so yeah, he's bounced around, and has worked directly with student athletes in the classroom and beyond for a long while now. So without further ado, Marlon, I'll let you take it over and kind of maybe just explain to everyone kind of a little bit of what you do now at Memphis and how you're. Also, sorry, and he since the spring has taken over diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at Memphis, and has described that as a lot of work that now complements what he already does. So I'll kind of let you explain kind of what you're up to and how you got here.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. I appreciate that, and I appreciate everybody jumping on tonight and spending a little bit of time. These kind of opportunities are important. From a and then we'll touch on it later, but networking, just from a networking standpoint, and just to kind of get perspective of how other people have gotten to where they've gotten to. So, um, in my current role, I oversee all the areas that you would consider that are part of the student athlete experience. So I actually oversee sports medicine, strength and conditioning, nutrition, all of our mental health services, and then I oversee our student athlete development area, which is sort of the programming piece, life, what used to be called life skills back in the day, and then oversee our student athlete advisory committee, which is sort of a group of student athletes, two from every team. So it's almost like student government back in high school or whatever else that you may have. Even on your campuses, you'd have sort of a government structure. Well, student athletes have their own sort of within the athletic department. And then, as Jake said, oversee all of our diversity, uh, equity, and inclusion initiatives, liaison to housing, conduct, Title IX education. So in this role, there's kind of a lot. It's kind of a wide ranging. So it's been pretty interesting. Prior to that, I was actually in academic support services for 17 years. So I oversaw just the academic component only. And coming here was an opportunity to kind of branch out and do some other things. And then I'm also the sport administrator um, for our volleyball program and our rifle team. And then I work with all of our coaches because I'm the administrator that oversees all of our other administrators. So and that's sort of what I do right now in a nutshell. Um, Anything else you want me to talk about there, Jake, on that one?
I'd be curious to ask, and maybe not to jump to a different topic real quick, but so obviously since I've known you, you guys have moved around quite a bit. Um, I'd be curious to see how you have been able to kind of take that in stride and just the reality of accepting that when you work in sports, like you're probably gonna have to bounce around a little bit. And I just curious to hear what your experience with moving has been.
Yeah, I think I think everybody's experience is a little bit different, right? And I think it depends what your goals are, right? I mean, I think it depends what your goals are and it depends on what you want to do. So, my goal was to get into administration and get some other experiences. So, I did go after strategically some different jobs to get some other experiences. So that way, when a position like this one here at Memphis opens up, that someone would look at me and say, okay, he's done enough things in his background that he can actually make this leap. I think if I had just stayed in academics and hadn't done anything else, this would be a kind of a hard leap to get to. So, the nature of athletics, people do sort of move around, and there are people that get lucky and they're able to stay at an institution for 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, I'm sure there are people there in the Iowa athletic department that have been there a long time. you know. They've sort of gotten into a position and maybe they're happy where they are, or they've been fortunate. They've sort of been able to be at the right place in the right time and kind of grow within the organization. So, I think, the biggest thing about working in sport is being open, right? Having an open mind and really having some flexibility as to, hey, I'm willing to take a job. My first job, first full-time job, I was at Syracuse and I went to Ames, Iowa, right? I mean, so it was like, if someone would be like, you went to Ames, Iowa? Yep, I was in Ames, Iowa, right? So, um, but it was a really good job, it was a really good opportunity, and working with men's basketball, which is sort of what I was known for, is working with men's basketball, working with football from an academic support standpoint, and that kind of boded well for me as I was able to kind of take that and then and have opportunity, be exposed to opportunities for other jobs.
So when you get these opportunities, have you taken a specific like networking strategy over the years, or is it kind of you let your work speak for yourself and kind of the chips fall where they may?
It's interesting. I think it depends on. I think every job is different, right? I think when I went to Iowa State, there was a connection there with Jim Boeheim at Syracuse, and he knew the head coach at Iowa State, and they had worked together before, and he's like, I got a guy for it, right? So that worked for me. When I went to Florida State, somebody said, hey, that's your guy, like that's who you need to go after. So it was a targeted search, and I was targeted for that role. Uh, there's when I went to Indiana State, I wanted to be a director. Then I used my network and knew people there to say, hey, like I'm really interested in this job. So, I want to be able to get my name and my resume in front of the right people and sort of to the top of the pile. So, I think it really depends on the job. And for the most part, I always use my network. I mean, I always will reach out to people, even if I was the one targeted. I'm still going to reach out to other people and be like, okay, is this a good job? Is this the place I want to be? Can I grow here? And I'll always try and find out as much as I possibly can about the organization, the culture, and everything else, really even prior to saying, yeah, I'm serious about, kind of going to this, possibly making this transition, or at least getting involved in the process. Because, my biggest thing is I don't want to waste anybody's time. If I'm not in or committed and I'm like, if I get that job, that I wouldn't take it. I mean, if I know that, yeah, I probably won't take it, then I'm really wasting other people's time, because now as a hiring manager, I know how much effort and work goes into searches. So, I hate to waste anybody's time. So, I think it's a big thing is if you're going to go for a job, just make sure that's something that you truly want, and don't waste other people's time, because that can all of a sudden start to follow you as having a reputation of getting in jobs and not accepting them, because as large as athletics is, it's a really small network. And that's, so people start talking and people talk through candidates for similar jobs. So, we just keep that in mind. And I know right now, I mean, I know Jake has some questions, but I mean, at any point in time, feel free. I mean, if anyone else has a question, I mean, you feel free, you can drop it in the chat or unmute yourself. I really want this to be conversational, and I want you all to get out of this what you want. Like this is really about all of you. This is I'm just here to facilitate, but this is your experience, what you want to get out of it. So
Yeah. Does anyone have anything kind of about Marlon's general experience or what he said there before we move on? Okay, so a couple things that I was curious to ask about that we haven't even talked about in full. One being the new wave of name, image, and likeness that is inevitably coming to college athletics. And another being, well, I know a little bit about this, but your role in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that's starting to transform college athletic departments across the country. But we can start with I just would like to know what you think, let's say 5 years from now, what name, image, and likeness, what it does to like universities and kind of how they maybe recruit or kind of how they have to transform their staff and their efforts to kind of cater to that new wave.
think it's a good question. I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's really going to depend on what the legislation says, right? If the legislation, I think people are still hoping for some control to be kept at the university level, and not being able to be used in recruiting, and you don't want it to be open market, because now, if Iowa and, let's say, Northwestern are competing for the same kid, well, Iowa's not going to win that battle, right? Because Northwestern can say, well, we got Chicago, so we got all these Fortune 500 companies, right? So you're talking about using this as a bargaining chip, because you're going to say, look, you know what, you can go to Iowa, but here you're going to be limited at, you're going to be capped at this, where you can come to Northwestern, and because we're the major city, we have access to this, right? And I think that's part of it, right? Like, we have to take away the recruiting piece of it. But I do ultimately think it's a great thing to change some of these rules to allow student athletes to benefit, right? To truly benefit from, their name, image, and likeness. I do think that the complicated part is, so let's just take Alabama, right? Let's take Alabama. So if I'm a really good football player and I go to Alabama, what makes me more money? The fact that I was a really good football player, or the fact that I'm at Alabama and that increases my exposure and my brand, right? So, I think the hard part is going to be, how much is it your personal brand that's actually driving those dollars, or it's the institution that you're at that's also helping drive some of those dollars. And I think, that's part of the messy part, is they're going to have to figure out, like, okay, what does that look like? Right. And how do we actually navigate some of those things? But I think, student athletes being able to go back home and do camps in their names, and do local camps back in their communities. And I think you'll see a lot of student athletes giving back to their communities, in different ways, having camps and different things where they can actually sort of leverage, sort of their success in their own communities, and then be able to make some dollars for themselves, but also be able to give back. So, uh, I think, the next probably 12 months is going to be really interesting to see what the NCAA can come up with, and what legislation is going to say, and then how all this is going to sort of shake out.
Gotcha. Do you think the competitive balance is like, do you think there's a way that we still see the same like level playing field on the field? Or is it kind of gonna like I almost have thought that maybe like the group of five schools in some instances become like almost like a farm system for like bigger, like not necessarily all power five, but like various power five universities. Like if it's a case where it's like, okay, I'm gonna start my career at Illinois State. And then if like I'm good enough after 1 year, maybe I'll transfer to Indiana for the sake of your brand growing more so than like
Mhm.
your actual on the field performance. Like, you think this hurts the less marketable athletes of the smaller schools?
You know, at the end of the day, there's only so many spots, right? So regardless, it doesn't matter, whether it's Alabama, Iowa, Memphis, you only get so many scholarships, right? So at the end of the day, there is a cap on that. So there's only so much people can move and all the rest of it. And I would say that, from like a Memphis standpoint, we have we have an advantage. We're a major metropolitan. We got FedEx, we got International Paper. I mean, we have Amazon here now. We have some major corporations here, right? So we have an advantage over some of our SEC peers that are right in our radius right here, because we are in a metropolitan. So we might be more attractive to somebody who wants to have access to a bigger market. So that's the one thing you'll find is most Power Five schools outside of a Northwestern, and there's a handful that you can name that are in sort of larger metropolitans. They're really in small college towns, right? So I don't know. I mean, you're already seeing it with the transfer stuff that, hey, kid who's going to come play a year at Memphis is like, hey, you know what? I think I can play at Oregon, and they're going to transfer. So you're already seeing it. I don't know if it actually tips the scale any more than you're already seeing it now.
So, and this kind of almost segues into DEI, but Rob asked what your
Yeah.
what your take on the WNBA lowering the age for college players under the draft is. That's very curious because we got to see maybe one of the most popular um, women's March Madness tournaments this year for us because we have a kind of a national level player.
Y'all got that freshman, man. She was killing it until she ran into a much better freshman, right? I mean, think about it. It was marketed. It wasn't marketed as Iowa and Connecticut. It was marketed as these two girls that are going to go to battle. And I, Rob, that's an interesting question because I just read. Um, who was I listening to? I was just listening to something just the other day about this same topic, and but lowering the age, and they even talked about, well, if those two girls came out, they probably top 5 picks, as freshmen. Um, eh, Here's the thing: I think until there's more stability financially in the WNBA, I don't know if it makes sense, right? Like I don't know if it makes sense to leave school for $100,000. It's different when you're leaving school for 3, 4, $5 million, a year or whatever the case may be. Um, so I think that's going to be interesting, but I do think that there will be there will be a first, right? There will be a first. I think they will lower it, and there will be a first that will do it, that will make that jump. And I think it'll depend on their situation, their financial situation with their families and all the rest of it. Um, but I think it won't become commonplace until this, sort of those salaries in the WNBA become, a little bit more lucrative, where you can say, hey, yeah, that makes sense to leave for, maybe a $500,000 job. Maybe that does make sense. So that's a really good question, Rob.
So, and I kind of want to piggyback off of that. We've seen women's sports stars in the last few weeks speak out on the kind of inequities of their pay and their leagues and kind of how it's treated. And Draymond Green was on, or I don't know if he was on ESPN, but he said got on ESPN, kind of giving the maybe the devil's advocate approach to how to do that. If there is a world where there's more equitable pay in the WNBA, let's say, compared to the NBA, how does
Mhm.
it how does it get there? And is it something that is able to be controlled through kind of like raising aware, like what people are doing now, is that going to kind of get the job done? Is there something else that's not being?
I don't know. When you start talking about raising awareness, you talk about, you know, people's love of the game, right? The people, if you like football, you go to football games because you like the game of football, right? Um, I think you have to grow the interest, right? I think you have to continue to grow the interest of the WNBA game. I think you have to have more recognizable names, right? Like you can name right now, even if you're not a fan of the NBA, I can ask you and you can name 10 NBA players. Could you name 10 WNBA players? And that's and I think that's where it goes, right? Like you have to grow sort of the grassroots, the sport, and really I think it starts with March Madness doing a better job from a college standpoint. So you get to know more of these players, right? Like you may now be a fan of the WNBA because you got to watch a player in at your own school. So you may actually watch, if she gets drafted, you may actually continue to watch her play because you saw her play, right? So you would have more of a vested interest, but the casual fan may be like, eh. So I really think it has a lot to do with them growing the sport becoming more recognizable, really exposure, I think is going to help that sport continue to grow because it's a great sport. It's a great brand of basketball, and I think that's really where the difference is.
Gotcha. So looking into the college athletic portion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we've talked about this on a kind of a foundational level. Just for everyone else here, I'd like you to just be able to kind of explain the early tasks and the early challenges of your new role there, and kind of how it's um, maybe the hiring process that we've talked about, and kind of just explain maybe how Memphis is attempting to put that into action.
Yeah. So, obviously, the last everyone knows what happened over the last year. Unfortunately, we had another one this past weekend, right, in Minnesota. And really after George Floyd, it was sort of like, okay, what are we doing? And we had student athletes hurting, we had staff hurting, and just you saw nationally basketball games were like, we're not playing, right? Um, and it was sort of like my boss was like, hey, what are we going to do here? And I am the senior most administrator in our department. So the really the only Black male, really only Black person in our athletic department at that senior level. So, him and I spent a lot of time together. And, the early part was challenging because you got to navigate the feelings of staff and those your student athletes, right? And everybody is hurting in different ways. So how do you sort of get everybody on the same page? And, we started a committee, and our committee is moving along. And really, we've done a lot of good things. We created a quality patch that is actually pretty cool, and it's been shown on ESPN a bunch of times during our games, and people are wearing it in the community. So that's been really good. And now it's sort of like, okay, what do we do next, right? Like, how do we continue this momentum? So right now, we're actually scheduled to do a full day retreat. Like, we're going to do a full day diversity retreat, right? Because we got to plan out next year and what does that look like, and how do we get more really just diversity in our department, but also in our hiring pools, and that's something that Jake and I've talked about a lot is, and I think it's about being intentional, right? It's not about, it's just really being intentional in our hiring. And you know research is what it is, right? You are more likely to hire someone that looks like you because of comfort. That's just what it is, right? And so unless somebody says to you, hey, you need to make sure you have X, Y, and Z in your pool is probably going to reflect you, and I know that I've been very intentional, and I've always been very intentional in hiring because it's important to me, but it's also important to me that our student athletes see themselves in the people that are around them on a daily basis, and I think that's very important that in our academic staff and our strength staff and our sports medicine staff, that they see, they see women, they see men, they see white, they see Black, they see Asian, they see whatever it is, but they can see themselves in one of those positions. And I feel like our senior administration should be the same way. So, um, I think, I think you're going to see more. I think you're going to see more, continue to see more departments. You've seen a lot of departments recently start creating specific positions to handle D&I work in their department because people are starting to realize that, there's a lens, and people are really starting to look at it. And you have people that are making hiring like this, like decisions on. Oh, sorry, I was reading Rob's comment. Thanks, Rob. Like you think more and more. I feel like people who are looking at jobs who are like, well, I don't know if that's a job that's in the department for me because there is no diversity, right? And so I think you have more and more people that are looking at that. Did I answer your question, Rob? Let me see. He says I did. More culturally will hire more. Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, it's definitely happening. A lot of places have have either hired, like created positions. And the other thing, just to note that the NCAA back in 2019 uh, passed a bylaw that says that every athletic department has to have, athletics diversity and inclusion designees. It's the acronym is ADID. So every single department has to have someone with that designation. So I serve as that person for our department, but a lot of places have kind of gone to that next level of hiring someone, and that's their sole responsibility is D&I work. So
Hey, Marlon, I had a question for you, just kind of
yeah,
based
right.
on the Memphis program overall. So I know that focusing on like the basketball program, like Penny Hardaway has done a really good job at kind of taking over that program. So for you being a part of that university, what's kind of been the impact on the athletic department as a whole since he's kind of started to take over and have his impact on the program?
Yeah, it's one of those nice things that to have a what people consider NBA superstar, right? I mean, when he was in his younger days when he was in, I mean, he was as good as anybody, right? And even if you think about watching, everybody watched it last summer, but the documentary, right, on the Bulls, I mean, Penny is part of that, right? He's interwoven into that whole fabric, and Penny's from. It's like the one thing about Memphis is they love their basketball, but they love their people, right? They love Penny. And Penny loves the city. So, the coach prior, they were averaging when Tubby left, I think they were averaging something like 6,000 fans a game. And now Penny shows up and they're 14, 15,000 a game. Just that impact alone, and you see the impact on recruiting, right? People want to come, and young guys want to come and play for him, and he's still, and here's the unique fact, and you may not know this, but so there's only two people. This is really interesting. Only two people that actually have their own brand with Nike: Jordan and Penny. So there are only two. Right. So people think, oh, LeBron. Nope. LeBron has a shoe with Nike, but he doesn't have a brand with Nike. Right. So when you think about recognizable brands, there's Jordan and there's Penny, which is kind of a neat thing. So Penny has really started leveraging that now, and you'll see it. It's on all of our, like all the stuff the guys wear. It's on, they're all wearing the 1 cent symbol and stuff like that. So his impact has definitely been huge on the department and, and the city.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear about, especially with the attendance that they really are interested in supporting. And I've definitely noticed that with the recruiting standpoint as well. I definitely think of like James Wiseman as a player that
Yep.
he definitely had a big impact on making sure he was able to get to Memphis. So really cool to hear about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thanks for that question, Ryan. That's great.
Marlon, so we talked about kind of looking at the senior level of athletic departments and kind of how there has been implementation of DEI kind of emphasis there. I'd be curious to ask, from your standpoint, are you looking into any like lower levels, like say like a graduate assistant level or a student worker level, and kind of diversifying those areas as well? Because ultimately that's kind of the youth that will grow into the higher positions as time goes.
Mhm.
I'd be curious if that's on your radar or if it's kind of hard to look at those areas because of how maybe seemingly low on the totem pole they are.
No, so we're actually looking at the department holistically, right? So we're looking at all of our areas. So entry level student workers, just really anyone that's going to be part of our program. So we have started a like minority internship position specifically to provide opportunities for minorities in areas of athletics that traditionally you don't find minorities, which is on the external side. So business, marketing, development, those are areas you rarely see them. Most of the time you see minorities, they're on the internal side, academics, compliance, and those kind of areas. But, I've really, and I'm really proud of our staff, but I've really challenged our staff to look at diverse candidates, whether it's a GA, and not just diverse racially, but diverse gender, right? Like we don't need an all male staff. we need a gender diverse staff, right? So even if that's so just being able to look at different things, and it's been neat to see people are truly taking that to heart now, whether that's GAs or student interns or whatever else, really looking at being more reflective of our student athlete body in our community. Memphis diverse community, so being able to reflect that also is important.
Gotcha. Thank you. Does anyone else have any kind of other topics or questions that maybe we haven't touched on? Or I feel like we've done a pretty good job, but just curious to open the floor up to anyone else.
Sam, you just here hanging out, man. You don't have one question. I answered every question you had.
Okay, I got one. So everything went down with the whole James Wiseman situation. What's your thoughts on that?
You would pick a hard one. I shouldn't have picked on you. It's tough. Like, I think no one has a crystal ball, so no one knew that Penny was going to become the head coach at Memphis. I mean, he's helped a lot of basketball kids in the city of Memphis. So James wasn't special, right? Like, and I say that to say, like, James is one of a lot of basketball guys in the city that Penny has helped out and reached out to, because that's just the kind of person that he is. So I think it's unfortunate that it was sort of like, well, I guess we need to have a crystal ball, and at some point, if he ever became our head coach, this would be an issue. But it also made us look internally to make sure that, are we providing the proper education, right? So when Penny donated money, like, with somebody, we should have had some communication that went along with that to say, hey, just so now you are considered a booster, and here are the things that come with that. But then also, how long are you a booster? And I think there's some questions and inequities in the NCAA's process that came out of this. Like, how long are you a booster? Penny gave a couple $1 million, I think it was like 10 years ago. So is there statute of limitations? Like, and I think the NCAA needs to come back and say, look, hey, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 7 years, whatever the case may be, but to put some sort of parameters on it. If I give $5, if I get my booster for the rest of my life for $5, like, so I do think, they really need to kind of hone in on that. And I think it's unfortunate. I think it was unfortunate for James, unfortunate for Penny and the program. Just kind of the way it all went down.
Awesome. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Marlon, have you guys gotten the vaccine as a athletic department yet, or how's it rolling out over there?
Man, I'm working on it right now.
Yeah.
That's a pain in my butt. The vaccine is such an interesting. The vaccine is like politics, right? Like it's the same thing, right? It's a personal choice, and you can't really push it on people, and you don't want to, right? So, we've put the information out there, and we know we have some student athletes that have done it and some that haven't, but we're actually setting up a window next week, Tuesday, to vaccinate anybody who wants to get vaccinated. It can be first or second dose, and we're going to Pfizer only. And it's going to be a window, 4-hour window, where we get all the student athletes that want to come in, and any staff and their family members and anyone else 16 and above. So we are doing that, and and I do think there is this. There's always this. So, like, in the technology world, they always say you don't want to be the first one to buy the first of any product, right? So, you see the new PlayStation. Well, you don't want to buy the first one because that was going to have bugs. You want to buy the second one, right? You want to, once they fixed it, you want the next one, right? So, I think it's the same thing with this vaccine. If people are like, I'm gonna wait and see how other people react to it, and how it kind of get more information before, I think we'll have, right now, I think we'll be about almost 50% of our student athletes are either fully vaccinated, want to be vaccinated, or have started the process. So, obviously we still got a long ways to go to kind of get full teams vaccinated, because there are some benefits, right? There's some benefits just to society. There's some benefits, but there's some benefits just to being able to get back to some level of normalcy, right? Like if all 5 of us are all vaccinated, we can actually sit together in a room with no mask on, right? I mean, that's so there is some people that are motivated by that, right? They're motivated by human interaction. Like, man, that's worth it to me to go and do this, so I can sit in the living room with my grandparents and not worry about trying to kill them, right? Like there's things like that, or people that in your family that have underlying health issues. So
I was gonna say we got it wasn't just football, but it was kind of athletics as a whole. Had the opportunity to get it vaccinated this past Saturday.
mhm.
Johnson, and then about 2 days later, they recalled the vaccine for us. So that was interesting. But yeah,
Well, it's funny. So we were supposed to do Johnson and Johnson last week, and I was like, and not like I knew anything. I was like, look, man, like we don't need to rush this. We need more time to plan. And I said, I don't have it in me to like try and get all this done in a short window. And no joke, if you talk about a couple of days later, they're like, yeah, Johnson, we're taking it off. And it's like, oh, I'm glad we didn't. So, I think again, I think it's one of those things that we hope people will do. Obviously, from a societal standpoint, it helps us get back to normal as quickly as possible. But we also know that it's still a very personal choice. So there's some people that don't do the flu vaccine, right? They don't get a flu shot every year, right? So, I look at it almost the same way.
gotcha. Rob, you got anything else before we kind of wrap this up?
I almost didn't recognize him, man. He changed environments. Look at that, man. He changed his shirt. He had a purple shirt on earlier. Look at him.
I literally go to work, I clock out, I clock in and clock out, I'm out. I gotta go home. I've been here too long. So do you like wearing multiple hats, or do you like focusing on one thing per day?
Rob, that's a great question. It probably depends on the day what my response will be. I like my role because it really does span our entire athletic department and our student athlete experience. So, for the most part, I do like it. There are days where, it's really, I struggle because it's like, okay, I may wake up in the morning, I'm dealing with a student athlete issue, but then I could be dealing with a medical issue, a mental health issue, a housing issue. Then I got to switch gears and I got to plan a D&I, event. So I mean, there's some days where like I'm literally putting on 6 or 7 different hats, depending on what it is, or even conversation to conversation. I'm like, okay, I got to put this hat on. Oh, we got to switch. I got to put this on. So, uh, I like that no 2 days are the same, but there are days where I'm like, I may just like if I was just doing 1 or 2 things and that's all I could focus on. So.
And then do you ever see yourself like wanting to be like top dog AD at a different school, or do you like the like deputy role kind of thing?
So yeah, this is a great question. So I aspire to be an deputy AD. I don't aspire to be an AD. I think that's what the role that fits me and that suits me best, right? Like I want to be able to support others, and I don't want to be so far removed from our student athletes that I can't do what I enjoy doing, right? And I still have enough interaction with our student athletes in my current role that I love it, that I can still have meetings with them and they still see me as a resource, and they still see me, close enough as someone that they can confide in versus, when you're the AD, and the boss, like things change, right? Dynamics change. So no, I don't aspire to be the top dog. I aspire to, kind of be the number 2 guy and, kind of fly behind the radar and just make sure stuff gets done.
And then are you part of like hiring coaching process?
I am. Yep. Damn.
So like, do you look for more like experience over like quality of the person, or you're more of like, damn, this person's really like personable, lots of, he has some experience, or are you more of like 10 years experience, this and that, championships, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I think it depends on what position it is, right? I think it depends on where we are as a program. Like, women's basketball coach, and we were very intentional. We wanted someone who has built programs and was a winner, right? Like that was the criteria. But we also wanted someone that had some head coaching experience, because we also understand where we are, right? At Memphis, this is a tough basketball city. It doesn't matter men or women. This is a tough basketball city. So we needed somebody who had sat in the chair before, who knew what they were getting into, right? And I think we made a fantastic hire. We hired the head coach who was recently at Wright State. They had the first, or I don't want, a few ever upsets, when they beat Arkansas in the first round of the NCAA tournament. So, that was a great hire for us, right? But I think if we were looking at a different position, if I'm hiring a rifle coach, I may look differently, right? I mean, I don't need a head coach for 10 years. I might go on someone who's young and who's more in touch with the kids and knows kind of what's going on now and has some really great experiences, right? So I really think it just depends on where you are as a department and kind of what your needs are.
I like it.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. So any other thoughts? Anything else anybody wants to chat about before we get off?
No, I really appreciate it, Marlon. I appreciate all of your insight. Is there any good way for us to kind of follow up with you at the end of this call and keep in touch? What would be the best way for us to do that?
Yeah, I was actually doing that right around you, like a mind reader. I was putting my email in the chat, so feel free. You can drop me an email anytime. I do fairly good at responding. Sometimes I have a 24-hour rule, so you may have to wait 24 hours because depends on which hat I have on. There's a lot going on. So, but now, feel free. If you have any other questions or ever want to connect, that's kind of really what I'm here for, and kind of what my passion is really is helping others, right, and helping others kind of get to where they want to go. So, if you ever want to talk career or whatever it is, just feel free to drop me a line, and we can always hop on something and have a conversation.
Awesome. Really
I
appreciate
do
it.
it for you're welcome. I do it for Jake, and I do it for Jake, and not just because he's family. I actually like him, so
No, but guys, thanks for getting on. And Marlon, thank you for the time as well. We were gonna try to do it on our app, but we got a test run yesterday, and it was kind of like it's gonna need I feel like there needs to be a moderator to be there too. Like there needs to be. It was kind of like an Instagram live kind of thing. It just wasn't. I felt that Zoom was going to be the best format for right now, but yeah, just thanks for kind of getting on, participating here, and I thought we had a good talk tonight.
Yeah, no, this was great. I mean, this I actually got to see faces. If we had done the app, it would have been me talking, looking at my own face, and trying to read comments as they popped up. So this was much better, this interaction, and and look, happy to do this again. And if there's other things you want to ever talk about, just let me know, and we can always hop on something.
I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
It's not really related to your job, but I've been to
Okay.
Memphis multiple times, like 2 hours away in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Yeah.
What's the best barbecue place in Memphis?
Oh, what's the best barbecue place in Memphis? Wow. I like Central. So
Yes.
I
I'm
like
with you.
Central Barbecue.
Central barbecues.
That's probably the one that I like, and that's the one my kids like the most.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was wondering if you knew about Central Barbecue.
oh yeah,
So that's why I asked.
Central,
Yeah,
or
it's so good.
One and Only. One and Only is another one we like. So those are the two. If you come to Memphis, they'll tell you have to go to Rendezvous, but I'm not a fan. That's just not my style of barbecue.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Yeah, Central Barbecue.
there you go. So,
Awesome.
all right, y'all. Well, hey, as y'all finish the semester, finish on a good note. Stay safe, stay healthy, and if you need anything, just let me know.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Marlon.
All right, y'all. See ya.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Yep. Bye.